Hello everyone, this is Aussie Elect. I am back here with Sormon, and today we are doing a video on the aftermath of the South Australian state election. Um, so everything is not concluded yet. We do have a number of seats that you can see on screen that are changing, that are flipping. Um, so we've got Adelaide, Devonport, Elder, Gibson, King, Newland, and Stewart to an independent. But we still have a bunch of seats where most of them with Liberal ahead, where are very close and we don't know the answer. And probably, it doesn't help that we have a lot of postal votes and early votes, so they're not going to be counted until tomorrow. But anyway, Solomon, you were there on the ground last night when the Labor Party took victory.
Yes, I was.
Were you actually in the hall where Peter gave his speech?
Yes, I was actually, but it was a bit funny, the situation, because I was the Labour scrutineer at the polling booth at West Beach. And so I was there, watching them do the vote count, and I bring out my phone, and I'm just seeing seat after seat just fall to the Labour Party. And I was like, oh no, I need to get to the city fast. I thought I was going to miss that speech. So I basically, as soon as the scrutineering job was done, I hopped in my car and beelined it straight for the CBD to get, and just made it in time to see the speech. It was definitely a funny experience.
And what are your sort of take homes from the night?
Well, we can clearly see that Labor very clearly got all four of their goals. So we knew they were going for four seats, which was Adelaide, Elder, King, and Newland. Not only did they get all four of those, they've also got Gibson and Gibson and Davenport, which a lot of people were not expecting. You can see those swings: 12% and 13.6% in Gibson. Those are very large swings that I think not even most people were predicting at all.
Yeah, so there's so many seats in doubt, and they're all Liberal seats. The Liberal Party really got hammered this election.
Going over to the party totals, the Labor Party has around about 40% of the total vote. Liberal Party has 34 to 35. The Greens are around about 9 to 10. The New Family First Party is around about 4%. One Nation, shockingly, got around about 3%. And poor old SA Best, they've looked like they've been completely wiped out in this election, which was no surprise due to the loss of Xenophon.
SA Best really have tanked. They're on 1.1%, and I really expected them to do a lot better than that. I thought they would get at least a couple of percentage, but it seems that without Nick Xenophon there and his strong personality, SA Best kind of they can't survive.
The reality is Nick Xenophon just didn't set up a party with longevity, unlike someone like Don Chip or Bob Brown did. Like, to me, with those type of people, you always felt like they were in a party that was a bigger movement. But unfortunately, Nick Xenophon, and in some respects, same with Pauline Hanson, their parties are very much a cult of personality built around them. And you see, as soon as they're gone, those parties just do not stand.
So One Nation got 4.2%. I'm not exactly sure how they did so well, because according to you, they didn't really campaign.
I did not see any call flutes for One Nation at all, nor did I see anyone handing out how to vote cards for One Nation. This seems to be completely based off the party's national image, and it feels shocking that, like, to be honest, I've often valued my state for being sort of the anti-Queensland, and to see a very Queensland-esque party do so well, all I can presume is basically this is the anti-lockdown crowd, the anti-vax crowd that has come out in full droves, and they've needed to choose one party to rally behind to vent their frustrations at government COVID restrictions. And obviously, as you know, Palm United wasn't running in the state election, so maybe
So
that
they're seen as like the Freedom
wasn't
Party,
it?
basically the anti-lockdowns, the anti-vax kind of party. They're seen as like sort of the alternative to the mainstream narrative. Like, we also had sort of the Liberal Democrats for that, but One Nation is sort of more prominent. So this is what the upper house is. Most people believe what it's going to look like. So Labor and the Greens just quite miss out on a majority. They need either SABS or One Nation. But this last seat here, like that could be the Liberal Democrats. Legalized cannabis got a few percentage as well.
So you're saying you think Labor's going to win 5 seats
Yes.
at this Senate?
Yes.
So Labor 5, Liberal 4, Greens 1, and One Nation 1. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
the
probably what
the
I'd
last
come
seat,
to.
The last seat will be between One Nation and the Liberal Democrats and maybe Family First. But if I was, if I was going to give it to anyone, I'd probably say One Nation. So that's just my.
Yeah, it depends because One Nation's doing they've almost got half a quota.
Yeah,
I might also want to turn your attention to the Greens. This is, I believe, the first time in a state election they've ever gotten a full quota in first preference.
I did not know that, and that is quite interesting. They did get a 4% swing towards them. Don't know where that came
Yeah,
from. Um,
it's mainly from the collapse of SA Best.
yeah, I mean, I know, but
If,
like,
if anything should be shocking, it should be the fact that the Liberal Party went backwards.
well, they did
That
slightly go
collapsed.
ahead in the upper house. They got plus 0.9%, but you're right. In the lower house in the Legislative Assembly, the Liberal Party did go backwards despite the removal of SA Best from. They went backwards by 3.3%, which is pretty shocking, as you were saying. Um, and the Greens, yeah, the Greens went up 3% in the lower house as well. So yeah, I mean, how did this happen? How did this happen when Stephen Marshall? I didn't think he was this unpopular. Like he was a pretty reasonable premier. People don't think he made that many mistakes during the pandemic. Was this election just about everything other than the pandemic? Had people completely forgotten about the pandemic?
But I think so. There has been questions: is this the first post-pandemic election? And it feels like the post-pandemic culture is definitely a lot more hostile to incumbents than it was during the pandemic. I definitely know New Zealand and Victoria are having a lot more struggles, despite being very popular governments only a year or two ago. They're now struggling with images there. But I also think you need to understand. So the problem with Stephen Marshall is the unfortunate reality. He's just unfortunately a very boring candidate for all like Trump's controversies and Johnson's bumbling and Scott Morrison being, well, Scott Morrison, the reality is they've been able to create a figure for them that has been able to get people's attention and people to watch and listen to what they say. Marshall just was there. He was not really a figure that people liked nor disliked. And unfortunately, that void in a popular figurehead was snatched right up by Malinowskis, who, if you look at that man's history, he is basic. He some respect people have often said he was born to be premier. Like Malinowskis has a way that really captures people and gets people to go, "Wow, I really like what this guy is saying." And I think that's one of the big factors in this election. It was very much in a popularity contest between Marshall and Malinowskis. Malinowskis was just a much more popular figure, just the way he talked and the way he presented himself, including
And
shirtless.
that's yeah, I know. Well, but it's interesting because it's usually difficult for opposition leaders to make this much of a mark on the public when most of the time people don't even know who the opposition leader is. But it really seems like somehow Peter got his name out there. I don't know how it happened.
So this is the thing you need to understand about Malinowskis is he was a very crafty person. So for starters, he went almost fully lockstep with the government's COVID decisions. Unlike the Victorian Liberals and the Western Australian Liberals who attacked their respective governments' COVID restrictions and were very hawkish, the Labor Party went straight along with these restrictions, straight to help with the government and look supportive. And this is what kept Malinowskis above water compared to other leaders. That he was also just very good at fronting the cameras. I noticed whenever there was an incident at Parliament House, he would often be one of the first people to front the cameras. So people saw his face a lot. And I don't even need to remind you about some of the things like the photo stunt at the Adelaide Aquatic Centre. Peter Malinowskis was someone who was always there. And I actually think I should mention, in the lead up to the campaign, Malinowskis did a very big campaign in which I think the famous line was, "I'm a pretty average footy player." That ad pretty much showed up. I saw it a lot of times on YouTube. I saw it on TV. He very much made this campaign about himself as the central figure. So when I was handing out how to vote cards, I saw almost as many cornflakes of Peter Malinowskis as I did of the actual candidate that was running in Colton, the seat I was in. Peter Malinowskis very much made his face front and center in the campaign and made jolly well sure that every single South Australian knew who he was in the lead up to this campaign.
So I just want to take a look at some interesting seats. So Wade's here is a seat where there's basically like a 4-person contest, or I mean, yeah, probably not a 5-person, but four or three at least person contest, and we really have no idea. This is going to take a while for them to work out who's going to win this because We have an independent on
Yeah.
19%.
Yeah, so Sam Dulac was a former Liberal who left the party after a scandal, and it looks very likely that he is not being re-elected. The other Liberals seem to have done well and got re-elected, but Sam Dulac he looks like he's gone here.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, it just really depends if where this independent Heather Holmes Ross preferences go. If they go to Sam Dulac, or if they go to Labor, if they go to Liberal. At the moment, they're showing Labor ahead by about 10%. But I think the reason that this is still unsure, which Labor was not expected to win this seat, like not at all. But I mean,
Not at all.
there was a lot of seats like that, to be fair. So, um, yeah, like I remember I was looking at the betting markets and just before the election, and they were interestingly saying that Dunstan was pretty close, actually. I think because there was a lot of talk about how,
Yes,
on that seat.
so Labor did a pre-poll in Dunstan that showed that they could potentially win the seat. I definitely thought this was a long shot, but mind you, I saw a lot of these seats were a long shot. So to see what the votes are right now and the potential that the premier of our state could lose his seat is that's a shocking. Dunstan is definitely the biggest surprise for me of this entire election.
Currently, this has Labor ahead, and the betting markets were sort of predicting there was something going on there, as well as Devonport. I remember looking at them. Like Devonport, interestingly enough, was the first seat to be called, despite the fact that there's like what, an 11% margin or something there. There was like a 12% swing to Labor. Okay, maybe it's not 11% margin, but the margin's pretty high anyway. Yeah, so Dunstan's one of the seats where Labor are ahead. We've also got Finnis, where an independent is ahead by about 10% again. And interestingly, the independent is in third place, so I guess they're assuming that One Nation or Greens preferences are going to go to the independent. It's going to be a race between them and the Liberal Party, but it could be a race between Labor and the Liberal Party as well. There's also just seats like Morialta, which have a massive margin, but there's just a massive swing to the Labor Party, where the Liberal Party are not quite perhaps going to win these seats, but we don't know. I mean, they're ahead in all of these, but it's only by very small margins. Um, and Hammond, well, look at this! Look at this swing to an independent.
The independent swings are misleading. Just remember, a lot of the time they're huge because this independent's come out of nowhere.
Yeah. So yeah, this, and once again, she's in third place, and they're kind of just assuming, I guess, that she's going to get Nationals preferences, um, and be able to be in second place and go against the Liberal Party. But it has the Liberal Party slightly ahead on that one, very very slightly.
National preferences would be interesting because you think they would normally go to a Liberal candidate.
Yeah, well, that's right. Yes, but the way Nationals are kind of viewed.
They're normally viewed as non-existent here.
Yeah.
Of the seats I was having a look at, the one seat I was actually interested in was in the all category was the seat of Playford, I believe, because this
Yeah.
is the only seat I can see that actually swung towards the Liberals.
We've got Ramsey here, which swung towards the Liberals as well. It looks like it's just these random seats. Like, where are they even located? They're like,
Playford's located in the north.
oh, they're all sort of in the north, I guess, area. Yeah.
And Ramsey also swung, so yes. So
Yeah.
it's possible these seats were just the result of boundary redistricting and
No, because I think that would have already been factored into the result.
yes,
So,
but other than that, and also pattern migrations, like new people can move in and stuff who often think and vote differently. But yeah, so these seats are pretty much right next door to each other, both sort of in the Salisbury area. But I thought it'd be interesting to see, like I say, in every election, there's usually always one seat that goes the other way. So I was always interested in these. Obviously, these the two. There's only two seats this time, but it's not like the 2019 election where there was several seats that swung to Labor and several seats that swung towards the Liberals. It does definitely look like a very definitive swing towards Labor.
I'm curious about the two-party preferred. I don't think they have it here, but this is a very big win for Labor. On the election night, we thought maybe they would only win by 1 or 2 seats. And that's still the case. They might only get 26 seats despite having, a 54%, majority.
Depending on the postals.
Depending on the postals. But that's still a big win for the Labor Party, and a big win for Mr. Peter M. Is there anything else that needs to be said about this election, you reckon?
As a Labor supporter, I'm definitely a lot more happy with this election than I have been with some of the party's previous elections. As you'd know, the Labor Party has historically last two elections the Labour Party have retained government for, which I believe was the 1982 election and the 2002 election. In both those cases, the Labour Party won without the two-party preferred result. They won in the end by like calling over independents, with some deals like making the House Speaker. So to finally have an election where Labour comes to power in a clear majority, where they've won all the seats, they've won the two-party preferred result, it definitely makes me feel a lot better in this election than in previous elections, where I'm like, is this really democracy at work when the party that wins 48% of the vote forms government? So that's one of the more uplifting stories, in my opinion, that this is actually a decisive win and the people actually do want change.
It's a deserved win. Yes, I agree.
Yeah. Also interesting, this also means Malinowskis holds the trend that is true for the entire Labour Party, which is every single Labour Party leader has become premier since 1960.
That's
You have to go back to
is
1960.
is that in South Australia or is that around the country?
No, in South Australia.
Oh, okay.
In South
right.
Australia, you need to go back to 1960 to find a Labour leader who didn't win. So that was in the Playford era, where basically the system was completely jerry-rigged. So the fact is, since we've had the modern electoral system, Labour has never had a leader who's only ever been opposition leader, which is a shocking fact.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Just shows you that South Australia is not New South Wales.
We have sometimes been considered a very red state since the end of the Playford era, just because of the sheer amount of Labour governments that win. Mind you, not all of them have won with the two-party preferred result, but we do have a very strong Labour presence here. And as we can see, they are just very good at winning elections.
All right, and I think my last question is, what do you think this tells us about the upcoming federal election?
Well, I think this is going to be a big morale boost to Labour and a big morale hit to the Liberals. Basically, the notion that a pandemic premier cannot lose has been completely shattered by this election, and Morrison is now more vulnerable than ever. I should note, in the lead up to the 2019 election, the New South Wales Liberals were able to hold on against the odds to get a third term in government. And that was then followed by the Liberals getting a third term in government federally. So if the trends hold true, potentially a big loss to the Liberals here could indicate a big loss for the Liberals federally. I don't know if that pattern will play, but yes, it's definitely very likely that the big question actually I want to bring up here in South Australia has to be with the federal seat of Sturt. Now, you probably already know that in South Australia, the big seat that's being talked about flipping to Labor is the seat of Boothby, which is in the southern part of the city.
But Sturt, what state seats is that made up of?
So Sturt is the eastern part of the city, and it's usually been considered a very safe Liberal seat. However, with such a decisive win for Labor on the state level, and polls currently federally are showing Labor potentially winning 60% of the two-party preferred result in the federal election, it is very likely that Sturt could be at play as well. So it's possible that we could see not only the marginal Liberal seat go to Labor, but also the safe Liberal seat. So that's one of the big things I'll be looking at going into the federal election in a month's time.
Yeah, so I think Sturt is made up of places like Dunstan, Hartley, Morialta, Newland, Wright, Torrens, Flory. It's like all of this sort of northeastern part of Adelaide, and these are all places where there's been massive swings to the Labor Party. I mean around the state there's been massive swings. So yeah, I definitely think that this is putting Sturt as a possible win. Boothby is pretty much just seen as like a no-brainer win for.
I think Boothby is viewed as a lost cause these days by the Liberal Party.
Yeah, the Boothby's gone, and it's really just a question of can the Labor Party possibly take Sturt. Which will be a very interesting contest. I think we'll have to watch.
So I've been definitely talking with my friends in that electorate to see what they're thinking at the moment.
But I do think that Australians sort of, they do, if there's a sort of like a feeling about someone in one state, that's probably going to be felt in other states. So I think this is really making Scott Morrison look like a bit of a liability I mean, he might be
Well,
able to improve his image by the time of the election, but at the moment, Scott Morrison is very on the nose. Probably not just in South Australia, but also around the whole country.
I don't want to like kid you here. I don't know how much of a factor federal liberals played into this. And it could be this big swing could possibly be due to distrust with the federal liberals, but Tasmania, instance, also shows huge swings towards the Labor Party on the federal level, but that was not seen at all in the Tasmanian state election. Um,
Yeah, but
so
Tasmanians are different to South Australians. They got a different
Yes, but South
they got different
Australians are
heads.
different to the federal Australia as a whole. So I don't want to know if this how much of this federal state factor is at play. Uh, the main thing I do agree is the morale boost. I do think this is going to be a morale boost for federal Labor and a morale hit for the Liberals federally to show that you can win and lose these elections. Um, but as for how much of a factor Scott Morrison's unpopularity played here, Marshall didn't necessarily distance himself from Morrison, nor did he necessarily cozy up to him. There was a few ads out there trying to link the two together, but I just don't know how much of a factor it played. I'm not be definitive on anything with federal implications currently.
Alright, I think that's all we really need to say for this video. Thank you once again, Sormon, for joining me.
Thank you
And
very much for having me.
I might make another little video as a sort of like a wrap up once all the seats are sort of sorted, because at the moment there's still a bunch which we don't know how it's going to go. And just make a small comment probably on the upper house too, because that'll be somewhat interesting. Um, but for now that's it, and goodbye everyone.
I'll see you in the federal election.
Yes, indeed.